do it. Favorite part of the show. Best basketball move of all time. A little stiff to the hips, but other than that, liquid, baby. All right. Houston Rockets. I am really intrigued by this team. I am so intrigued by this team, by the way, that I actually started an NBA franchise, an NBA 2K during quarantine. I will say the bench is awful. I traded for Duncan Robinson. Dear God, is he awful defensively. So I need some help. But regardless, the Rockets actually, I think to me, and I think they should be to everybody, a fascinating team. And actually, and we had talked about this multiple times when the edge was obviously intact with my humans and myself, and right before the hiatus, the way that the Rockets are currently constructed, they're going to be a very, very high variance team. And what you mean by that is they're going to win a game by 20, they are going to lose a game by 20. And I don't think there's really going to be much in between for a team like the Houston Rockets. But let's get to, so I think there's contrasting numbers here for the Houston Rockets, right? Because you have the season-long numbers, which we're going to give you right now, but you also have the numbers that they have posted since they've become the small ball team. But let's get to the numbers overall, because there are some carryover for what the Rockets are, because of course they have their system and the way that they perform. So let's take a look at some of the numbers for the season overall for the Houston Rockets. Offensively for the Houston Rockets, second best team in terms of efficiency at this point right now, right? 113.4 points per 100 possessions. Their half-court efficiency and their fast break efficiency are absolutely brilliant. And what's great too, by the way, so the half-court efficiency, 98.4 points per 100 possessions, fifth best in the NBA. Fast break efficiency, 127.9 points per possession, per 100 possessions, I should say. Can you imagine 127.9 points per possession? Fourth best mark in the NBA, right? And the free throw rate is nuts, 23%. That, of course, because of that guy right there at the top, James Harden, fourth best in the National Basketball Association. But the thing that I like the most, obviously, about their offensive strengths is it ties into their two key role players, right? A guy like Russell Westbrook, who is dynamic in the fast break and in transition, leads the way for a fast break efficiency that is the fourth best in the NBA. James Harden, who is the king of isolation and plays in ISO spots a lot in these half-court possessions, is a reason why they're so efficient, which is why they're the fifth best half-court offense in the NBA. And even a team like the Houston Rockets with their offensive weaknesses, kind of like we talked about with the Milwaukee Bucks, right? The Milwaukee Bucks' defensive weaknesses, you put in air quotes, aren't necessarily weaknesses because they're by design for the scheme. And it's the same thing with the offensive weaknesses for the Houston Rockets. Take a look at their offensive weaknesses. Three-point shooting, right, percentage-wise, 24th best in the NBA as a team that are just shooting 35% from beyond the arc. And their non-corner threes, they're shooting 33.9%, 23rd in the NBA. But you've heard me say this before, and I'll say this one more time, right? Because the Houston Rockets are, right, or they are I forget the term, but they are what we've talked about, right? The death of the mid-range shot. They are layups, free throws, and threes. That's what they want to do. And they'd rather be inefficient in a more efficient spot on the floor, like the three-point shot, than they would be in the mid-range, which is why like they lead the league by far in terms of three-point rate, because they're willing to take a lot of shots from three and hit at a low clip, because you'd rather be less efficient from three than less efficient from mid-range, right? So that's why even offensive weaknesses like three-point shooting at 35.1%, it seems like that's an issue, but it's by design because they take so many three-point shots. So let's look at the defensive strengths before we get into the small ball numbers, right? Because we're gonna look at the adjustments and what's changed. Defensive strengths for them, I was actually surprised by a lot of the things they were good at defensively, right? The mid-range shooting, we're like 38.5%, sixth best in the NBA. I always take mid-range shooting defensive numbers with a grain of salt. How much of that is the inefficiency of that spot on the floor? How much are you actively guarding against mid-range shooting, right? And usually the sample size of the mid-range shots that you face as a team is relatively smaller. So take that for what it's worth, but they still have the sixth best mark in that regard defensively. Three-point shooting, perimeter-wise, great. 35.1%, almost identical with what they shoot as a team. Ninth best in the NBA. Corner three-point shooting, this is where it gets intriguing, right? Corner three-point shooting, opponents are shooting just 33.8% against the Houston Rockets. A lot of that probably has to do with, right, their switching scheme on defense. You can switch almost everything. You're always going to have a guy in front of you, even when you're beaten to the rim. Maybe you just always have somebody that's out there to kick out and run guys off of the three-point line. Whatever it is, it's interesting because, as we've talked about, rim shooting is correlated with corner three-point shooting. If you're successful at the rim, you'll be successful in the corners. If you're not successful at the rim, you won't be successful in the corners. Well, Houston kind of pushes back against that narrative because their three-point shooting is the best in the NBA, corner three-point shooting defensively, I should say. But they're one of the worst in terms of guarding the rim. They gave up 65.4% at the rim to opponents. That's 22nd in the NBA. On top of that, You have things like non-corner threes, 35.6%, not good, 19th, and fast break efficiency is not good. 125.8 points per 100 possessions, 23rd in the NBA. So this is the breakdown of the Houston Rockets team that we've known throughout the entire season. But if you follow the NBA, and of course you know about what happened with the Houston Rockets, they made a drastic change. Clint Capella is no longer with the team. They went full small ball, adding Robert Covington and saying, ancient P.J. Tucker, you're going to be our center. We're going to run you into the ground until you die, and this is how we're going to play basketball. So we have another graphic, some of the numbers for this team that stick out to me, right? And this is since February 6th. This is the first game in which Robert Covington wore a Houston Rockets uniform. If you remember that game, it was actually a win at the Staples Center against the Lakers. So since that game, they're 8-6. Their net rating is barely positive, outscoring opponents by 1.5 points per 100 possessions. Here's what really sticks out, though. And they weren't a good rebounding team to begin with, right? But the rebounding numbers are atrocious. And I put the ranks next to these so you get an idea. And again, I should tell you that like 30th, 29th, 22nd, the numbers you see there are their rank in that stat over these 14 games, okay? So it's not season long. So defensive rebounding rate, they're only getting 68.7% of defensive rebounds. That's 30th in the NBA. Their rebounding rate overall, 46.1%. Every rebound available, they're only getting 46.1% of them. That's 29th in the NBA. The second chance points that they're giving up per game, 13.7 second chance points per game, 22nd in the NBA. So the rebounding metrics are really troubling, right? And a reason why that's really troubling will take you back to the regular season right before the hiatus. The Houston Rockets were in New York, and they played the New York Knicks. They had to overcome, I think it was like a 13-point deficit near the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, because the New York Knicks, for as many things as they're bad at, they're actually one of the best rebounding teams in the NBA. And it really threw Houston for a whirl because they could not beat New York on the boards. This is the same thing here, right? You're asking a Houston Rockets team that is in the range of, I think, 20, 30 to 1, depending on where you shop, if you want to bet them to win, right, in the NBA, or excuse me, to win the NBA title. Doug Gazarian brought this up with us a couple of days ago when we actually talked to him about it. It is so hard for a team that is routinely beat as bad as this team has been over these 14 games since they've been small on the boards to ask them to win consecutive best-of-7 series because of how outmatched they are in terms of rebounding. Because eventually you're going to have to win a key offensive rebound or a key defensive rebound. You can't be giving up nearly 14 second-chance points per game. And to give you an idea how bad that is, for the season-long numbers, the worst team in terms of second-chance points, that's at 12.5 in that range. So obviously second-chance points, 13.7 over these last 14. That's actually pretty troubling, right? And then you look at the defensive efficiency overall. 15th, not terrible, 111.2 points per 100 possessions. But again, when you're getting into a playoff field, giving up 111.2 points per 100 possessions is not going to help you out any. And then you get to points in the paint, which they give up every single game, 52.4, again, over these 14 games, ranking 25th in the NBA. So here's the thing, right? We talk about the high variance. The other thing that has stuck out to me when it comes to this team, they're taking over 45 three-point attempts per game. Again, with that shooting rate of about 34%. They're going to be a high-variance team. Some nights the shots are going to fall. Some nights they aren't. But just look at the teams in front of them. You have the Los Angeles Lakers, who are one of the best teams at the rim, both offensively and defensively. You have the team who they're matched up with right now in the Denver Nuggets, which that's an intriguing matchup in and of itself because the Denver Nuggets, that we have mentioned when we did our Nothing But Analytics profile on them a couple of weeks ago, they're a team that's built around the mid-range, but they still have the potential, if they want to adjust their game plan, with a guy like Nikola Jokic, with a Paul Millsap, to be able to dominate within 4 feet if they want to. It's just not within their scheme. But even like a team like the Utah Jazz, who, again, it's not really a great matchup for Utah, and they're extremely banged up. Bojan Bogdanovic not playing anymore, obviously, because of the wrist injury. But a good rebounder and defensive center like a Rudy Gobert. How does that play out in a matchup like that? But overall, teams like the Lakers, the Clippers, Denver for the most part, they have these presence within 4 feet of the basket that can dominate if they want to. And when you're a team like Houston, who gives up a lot at the rim, who can't stop in terms of opposition in terms of points in the paint, and who have the rebounding numbers that they do, it's just hard to look at a team like the Houston Rockets and have confidence in betting in them going forward that they're going to turn this thing around. Again, they're going to be a high-variance team. They're going to win a lot of games. They're going to win games by a lot of points, and they're going to look dominant some nights. But other nights when the shots aren't falling, that's going to be a massive issue for them. And I just don't know if Houston is going to be able to pull this off with the lineup that they have rolling out there at this point right now. And we haven't even talked about the bench, which to me is a little troubling as well because it is relatively thin in terms of scoring talent. But D'Antoni's done a great job, just like he did with Chris Paul and James Harden, of staggering Russell Westbrook and James Harden throughout games to negate some of the lack of depth that they have bench scoring. So regardless, there's your profile on the Nothing But Analytics on the Houston Rockets, a team that really, since they've gone small, not surprisingly, has had a lot of trouble keeping opposition off the boards, has had a lot of trouble keeping teams out of the paint, and has had a lot of trouble with second chance points, and I don't think it'll be able to hold up once we get this postseason rolling again. So, all right. Let's move on from that. Last minute here, again, if you missed out on any part of the show, right, Steve Cerruti was great, despite my weird mechanical questions about the English Premier League, which, by the way, we are at the break. Sheffield and Aston Villa are tied. It is scoreless, goose eggs, both sides at halftime right now. Sheffield United dominating possession at this point right now, but Aston Villa with the advantage in terms of corners 5-2. So I have decided, since we're going to do more English Premier League coverage, again, I picked the Queen's Park Rangers many years ago. They got relegated that same year, so I'm not really good at this. So I'm going to take the safe pick, nestled right in the middle of the table. I'm going to pick a team to follow in the English Premier League. That will be Crystal Palace. There we go. Yeah. I'm messing with you guys. They're like, wait, when do I pull the trigger? When do I pull the trigger? All right, Crystal Palace FC. That's the team. That's it. I'm going to root for them. I'm going to order in the next 30 minutes a Crystal Palace FC jersey, which will probably be a little tight on my soft body, but hopefully, we'll be taking care of that eventually. All right, that does it for the show. Again, if you missed out on any part of the program, check it out, vsin.com/bestbets. Nice little podcast forum for you. So you can go ahead and listen, do stuff around the house, or you can watch. Remember, VSiN Plus subs are free until the major sport returns. We have plenty of coverage over the next 2 days here on VSiN On the Edge, so make sure you tune in every single day, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will see you tomorrow.